Before I begin today's review, I would like to give a massive thank you to Rachel Hollis for recommending this book in her new morning routine video that she released in 2021. Recently on Your Morning Guru, we were like, well, Rachel's got a new morning routine and our show's all about guru morning routines, so we better react to it. So we reacted to it, and she was like, I love this book called The Artist's Way, and so many people in our audience were like, they'd been saying for a long time, you guys should review The Artist's Way. You should do a week on The Artist's Way on Your Morning Guru. So thank you, Rachel, by which I mean, thanks a lot, Rachel. This book sucked.
Get you some nuts.
There was lots of memes.
Makes me wonder if I should take up lesbianism.
Chicago.
You guys asked for it.
What's up, my fellow small business supporters? I'm Savvy. Welcome back to Savvy Writes Books, the channel where we talk about books and business, and today we are going to be talking about one of those books that's kind of about writing. It's not about writing itself, it's about like all types of different creative types of things, and that book is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. On my morning show, Your Morning Guru, that channel's linked in the description below, we recently did an entire week on The Artist's Way where we read the book, we reviewed it, we kind of followed some of the advice in it. We followed Julia Cameron, the woman who wrote this book, and we took a look at her courses and all of that. A lot of people, I hope I don't piss people off today. I hope I don't. But a lot of people in my audience really seem to like her, and I personally, this book didn't resonate with me. I thought there was a lot of really weird shit in here, and we're going to talk about why in just a moment. However, one of my good friends, Gail Gallagher, who is actually the musician who wrote the theme song and performs the theme song on the Your Morning Guru show, she's fantastic. She read this book as well and actually had a more nuanced opinion and got a little bit different of a takeaway from it, so I decided to have a discussion with her as well about that book, so I'm going to be cutting that in here into the video as well. So hello, I am here with Gail right now. She is, you guys may recognize her voice. I don't know, say hi, Gail.
Hello!
She did the music for the Your Morning Guru theme song. She tells us that it's a beautiful day to beat the sun up every day. Thanks so much for coming on today, Gail.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I am so glad that we get to talk about Artist's Way because it is absolutely my stuff.
Now, I will say I did get some benefits from this book, which I am going to be talking about, including getting into some better creative practices. And one of the ways that I've been creative lately, and that's been helping with my business and my career as a whole, is in adding more things to my website and working more on my site, SAVYWritesBooks.com, which is exactly what today's sponsor is all about. Today's video is sponsored by Zyro, a website builder that helped me create my own website, SAVYWritesBooks.com, which is linked in the description below. Zyro lets anyone create amazing websites and launch professional online stores without any need for coding skills or any web design experience. Best of all, Zyro is super affordable for those looking to start a website or even a new online store. If you're interested in creating a website of your own, you can use Zyro's limited time deal where you can get a discount of up to 71% off with a custom domain and 3 months free along with any yearly plan. To access this special discount, use the code SAVVY or click the link in my description box below. I had a really easy time building my website with Zyro. Their drag and drop editing options let me be creative when customizing the layout of my own site, and I appreciated their store layout options. As you guys know, I have a variety of different components to my business, including this channel, my merch, my morning show merch, my company Forever Home Friends, my signed novels, and more. So breaking up my website and my store into categories really helped me organize my website and make it really user-friendly. Zyro also has excellent 24/7 customer support, so even if you're like me, as you guys know, I'm not tech savvy, even though my name is Savvy. Even if you're like me and don't know how to code a website, you'll still be able to create your own website that you're proud of. So if you guys are interested in getting a website of your own, go ahead and click on the link in my description below to get started. So thank you again to Zyro. Also, thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys are wonderful. Guys, check out the description below to see my $5 a month and up patrons who have their own businesses or websites or whatever linked in the description below. They're small business supporters, and we want to support them as well. Now let's talk a little bit about The Artist's Way. The Artist's Way was published in 1992. It is written by Julia Cameron. Julia Cameron has a very interesting backstory. She was actually married to Martin Scorsese for a little while. while, which is kind of interesting. I think she's one of the most household name type of famous people that she's been involved with, but she is, you know, a screenwriter, a playwright, a film director, an author. She's very into a lot of different creative worlds and a lot of different artistic forms. What the book's premise is, I like on the surface, but I don't like the execution. So the premise behind The Artist's Way is that it is a 12-week-long program to get yourself back into a creative mindset using spiritual journeys and spiritual paths to finding creativity. The reason that it's broken into 12 weeks is that it's supposed to be modeled after the 12-step alcohol recovery program, basically. And that is because Julia Cameron, the author, had suffered with addiction herself before getting help overcoming addiction and realizing that funneling a lot of energy into her own work and her creativity was a much healthier way to explore those things. And she had a lot of issues at the time with the idea of going completely sober, not drinking, not doing any drugs anymore, because, you know, this was late 80s, early 90s, and still today, but even especially in those times, if you were involved in artsy and creative circles, there was somewhat of an expectation and a social pressure to be using substances of some kind. I even worried, like, am I a better writer when I'm drunk? Am I a better writer if I take drugs or whatever? And that's not a really healthy way to view the world. There still is a stigma out there, and I had professors who would tell me, like, a lot of writers who were successful and were alcoholics, they were successful and they were alcoholics. It's not because of that. That's another hurdle they had to overcome. So don't ever mistake seeing a lot of creative people abusing substances with thinking that that is helpful to their work in any way, because it is not. So that's a massive, very unhealthy misconception that goes around in a lot of artistic communities. So I do think it is good that she was approaching this from the perspective of, hey, yeah, I actually got sober, and being sober was the right thing for me, for my artistic career, and trying to promote that healthier way of looking at it, which I think is fantastic. Now, as you guys know, I am not a sober person whatsoever. I smoke a lot of weed, drink a lot of alcohol, I love bourbon, I love rye, I love beer. So I did kind of get a little annoyed with all the things that were like, drinking and doing drugs is universally unhealthy at all times, and that kind of narrative, because yeah, it's not the healthiest thing for you, but we all do unhealthy things in our lives. It's all about moderation and recognizing the signs of addiction when they come. It's a little more complex than just drinking bad, sober good, right? Although I will say I do admire Julia Cameron for getting sober and still being able to express this book where the idea is, hey, if you want to get out of this rut, you don't need substances to do that. So I think it's a good message overall. However, I did think it was really weird that the book was trying to treat creative recovery as in getting out of a creative rut, as in being trapped in your 9-to-5 job and struggling to do your art, comparing that to recovering from addiction, to recovering from substance abuse. She draws a lot of comparisons in this book that I think are very weird. I don't know if tone deaf's the right term. They're just very, very weird and insensitive in a lot of ways. So yeah, for some people, getting their creative muse back may be a difficult struggle, and she can compare that to her struggles with getting over alcoholism. But to say that this is a 12-step creativity recovery program, and it's basically the same as recovering from addiction, I find that very weird. However, I will say that I did enjoy a lot of the exercises that she had in this book. So the actual practical advice in this book I think is very useful. I think the problem is, much like when I was talking about Mel Robbins the other week, you know, how making a 5-second decision could be helpful if you're a person who struggles to move forward with your decisions. It doesn't need to be a whole book. It doesn't need to be a whole course. You don't need to drag it out into this entire franchise and this entire business guru type of model. So Julia Cameron's over here saying, here's the main 2 things, right? The main 2 things I got out of this book are 1, the morning pages, and 2, the artist date. Those are basically the practical pieces of advice that are the foundations of The Artist's Way. So the morning pages idea is that basically every morning when you wake up, you write 3 pages handwritten, and you just free write them. Just, like, do 3 pages, you write until you're done, don't care about spelling, punctuation, grammar, you don't care if what you're saying makes sense, you just get the thoughts in your head on paper, and sometimes that can lead to coming up with good creative ideas, or sometimes it can just kind of get the clutter out of your head. I do actually like this idea, and I started, when we were following her on Your Morning Guru, I started using this journal that I just recently got. It has a cute pit bull on the cover, and it says, "Rescues are my favorite breed," which I love. So I started doing the morning pages exercise in this journal, and that actually led us to adding something new to the Your Morning Guru show, which is to do a 2-minute journaling period every morning on the show. which is kind of nice because a lot of people in our audience really like journaling, and it's a way for people to just kind of quickly get their thoughts down, and it gets you in the habit of daily writing. So I did like that. I thought that was good, tangible advice. The other piece of advice I liked was the artist date, which was the idea that every week you should set aside a couple hours, build it into your schedule, where you are going to go out to a place that inspires you. You're going to go maybe to a bookstore, maybe to an art gallery, maybe go see, go down to the lake, walk by the sunset, do something that is just for the purpose of you and your ideas and brainstorming and letting your mind wander and letting yourself take in art and things like that. I think that's a great idea because it is something that can be difficult just to remember to do when we have all these other obligations, and to make that part of your habits. As you guys know, I think making things into habitual practices can be really helpful when you are trying to build things into your life as a whole instead of just trying to do some kind of quick fix. So I did think that was a good idea. Those two ideas on their own, fantastic. Does this need to be this massive book and this massive course? No. We'll talk about the course in a minute, but first let's just go a little bit into the book. Because Julia Cameron is a religious person, and because she's also building this after the 12-step program, which does have religious influence in it, this book is very, very religious. This is similar to the problem I had with Jen Sincero in You Are a Badass at Making Money, all those books. A lot of times you'll get business gurus who are like, they're very religious people, spirituality guides a lot of what they do, and they can't really separate their own practices, their own thought processes from their faith, which is fine for them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the book is going to be for me. But a lot of times the publisher, the marketing team, they want the book to be for everyone, so it has a wider sale and a wider audience, and as a result, the author will often add a little disclaimer in there that says something like, well, it's okay if we don't believe in the same God, it's okay if you don't believe in my God, if you're not Christian, if you don't have religious beliefs, if you believe in, just source energy or higher power or universal intelligence, if you believe in just something out there in the world, doesn't have to be God. But then the rest of the book just completely goes against that and makes it very clear that they are talking about God as in the monotheistic religious sense. So, for example, she was like that at the beginning of the book, like, I don't just mean God, you can have this be anything you want, doesn't have to be God, and then she would come back later and basically be like, oh, so here's a story of this guy who got his creativity back in this sense, and this amazing situation fell into his lap when he thought about it and kept his mind open. Now, if that doesn't prove to you that God exists, I don't know what to tell you. That was very obviously an act of God. Checkmate, atheists. Like, she would do that kind of shit a lot, which I thought was really weird because it seemed to go directly against the whole it's okay if we don't have the same religious beliefs, because then later some of the stories she would tell, in order for the story to have the right impact, it would hinge on having to have her religious beliefs, which I didn't like. I found that really alienating. In addition, there was a lot of manifestation bullshit in this, a lot of having to think about things. It was similar to, you guys remember when I reviewed You Are a Badass and Jen Sincero was kind of like, isn't it funny how whenever you need money for a big bill that's coming up soon, it always, if you think about it really hard and try to manifest it, something always happens. Like, you sometimes maybe remember some money in your bank account you forgot about, or a check arrives in the mail, you find $20 on the ground, and I'm like, no, that doesn't usually happen. What are you talking about? This book had a lot of that kind of stuff in it too, where it was like, if you think about this, it'll happen. Aren't these couple situations of funny coincidences absolute proof that manifestation works? I hate it. I don't like that. For me, what works is building writing habits, is working on writing things every day, is working on, brainstorming new projects and making sure that I have a strong community of other creative people around me. That's what works for me. Manifestation is, in that sense, I think it's absolute bullshit. So I'm like, nah, that's not my thing, really. On top of that, this book just had a lot of really, like I was saying earlier, insensitive type of things in it. For example, there's one part where she's talking about doing the artist date, right? And she talks about going to a place where you can get inspiration, where you can get, some different creative input, some different creative stimulus, from sensory experiences or whatever. And one of the things she suggests among suggestions, like, going to an art gallery, going to the movie theater, seeing a show, going to a bookstore, things like that, is she suggests going to an ethnic neighborhood. Never really specifies what she means by that, and I'm like, okay, well, first of all, some people who are reading this might already live in an ethnic neighborhood, and I also didn't know, Some people in our chat were saying that, like, since she's a white woman, she probably meant a non-white neighborhood, because I'm also, like, in Chicago, we have a lot of, like, there's, like, Irish neighborhoods, Polish neighborhoods, Italian neighborhoods, like, there's a lot of white neighborhoods that are still based on certain ethnicities, and that's the same in a lot of big cities. Like, I know New York has populations like that, too, but then there are also neighborhoods that are based on, you know, racial differences and things like that. So I'm like, is she being racist here? Like, because that's a very, like, just weird fucking thing to say. There's a lot of other really weird shit she said in this book. One thing she mentioned was she was talking about reasons why people suppress their creativity sometimes, and in a lot of cases it could come from the fact that, you know, maybe someone in your life tried to discourage you from being creative when you were younger. Some, like, your parents maybe told you, you need to get a real job when you grow up. Being creative doesn't pay the bills. I think a lot of people can relate to that, to having their creative dreams squashed by the world around them, telling them, no, it's not practical and things like that. But one of the examples she gives is saying, like, a lot of times boys, like young boys, will have their creativity discouraged by their parents because their parents are worried that they're going to grow up to be gay. And I think she said gay or infertile. She's like, they're worried they'll grow up to be gay or infertile. And I'm like, I mean, maybe there are probably some, you know, awful prejudiced parents who believe that out there. I'm sure there are. And especially remember, this book's almost 30 years old now. So yeah, I mean, it's very well possible that in the time she was writing that was more common. But the reason she gives behind it, she's like, this isn't a true thing to think, but a lot of people think this because they've read too much Hemingway. And I was like, is the implication there that Hemingway was either gay or infertile? Because he was neither. Like, it's very well known. I might actually, let me know in the comments below if you guys are interested in a video essay on this. I'm considering doing this essay on, like, the toxic masculinity of Ernest Hemingway. I'm potentially considering that. But he was an absolute womanizer. Like, he was cheating on women with other women constantly. He had 4 different wives, and he had tons of children with them. So, like, he was, like, an incredibly fertile, incredibly loving to fuck the ladies kind of man. So, the whole, like, I have no idea where that weird narrative came from. Like, did she just make that up? It's like, what the fuck is she talking about there? So I was very confused about that. She later talks about, like, write down the things that you brainstorm that are reasons you're scared of expressing your creativity. And it was things like, I'm worried if I'm creative, my partner will leave me. I'm worried I'll get AIDS. And I was like, okay, so this book's from the early 90s. This was, like, right at the height of the AIDS crisis. So was the worry there, and this could just be because I'm bad at drawing specific conclusions, was the worry there that if you're creative, you're going to join, like, communities of artists where people are passing around heroin needles? Like, was that the implication we were supposed to draw from that? Because I was a little lost. A lot of the shit I was a little lost on. It could just be that I'm too young. I could just be too millennial for this book. So anyway, there was just some weird stuff in there like that. Along with that, some of the other most insensitive things were when she talked about how to handle difficulties in your creative life, and she compared them to, like, massive tragedies. So, for example, she talked about, like, if you put a piece of work out there and it gets bad reviews from people who didn't really get it, and then those bad reviews discourage other people from consuming your work, then your work is kind of, like, cut off before it really reaches its full potential. And she says that because your work is kind of cut off before it reaches its potential, that means that you've basically had a miscarriage. She literally uses that language. She says miscarriage, literally. She's like, and you should mourn this as a miscarriage because it's a creative miscarriage. And I'm like, girl, what the fuck? Like, no. Yeah, different people are gonna mourn things differently. And it's totally fine to tell people that in a creative circle, if a certain thing doesn't pan out with your work, that it's fine to mourn that, and it's fine to identify those emotions, and that you should be willing to treat that as a legitimate loss because it is an emotional loss for you, and to work on identifying those emotions. I think that's absolutely fine, but it isn't literally a miscarriage. That's not what it is. Is it possible that someone who may feel the same way about the two of them, that there may be some person out there who has both had a miscarriage and gotten bad reviews and their work was squashed, and they felt literally identical about both of them? It's possible. I can't read people's minds, but they're not the same thing, so to compare them is just wildly, like, insensitive. And then on top of that, she says something similar in, like, the next page, where she's talking about how if you had a teacher growing up that squashed your creativity, that this was basically the same as being, like, groomed and assaulted. And I was like, girl, what are you smoking? I'm sorry, that was insensitive because she's sober. But, like, what the fuck, dude? I was like, I'm getting things out of this in the sense that it is giving me good ideas of how to build good writing habits. And since on Your Morning Guru, I've been very into building habits in terms of, you know, we did the Atomic Habits book for a week, and I've been building a lot more habits in terms of drinking the right amount of water and working out as much as I want to and drinking less alcohol, especially on weekdays and things like that. Because I have been building up all those habits, I realized that I built up a lot of habits for my personal life, but I didn't do a good job of building up a lot of career habits. So I did want to work on something that would help me build better writing habits so that I didn't like, you know, I wasn't just like, oh my god, deadlines, but instead was regularly and steadily in the process of always working on some new projects. And it did work. I'm actually in the process of working on a bunch of new books right now. During the past week when we were studying that, I started, you know, doing a daily habit of writing for an hour uninterrupted when I got in from walking Chewy. I would get in from walking Chewy, sit down, write for an hour, and then after that handle the things that were on deadline next. Because if something I was writing wasn't on deadline, or if it was like a magazine assignment rather than like a book, I might put off the book a little longer and then end up with a huge project that's completely unfinished, right? So this was helping me say, okay, if I have to start everything else an hour later, unless I have a meeting or something, it's not going to be the end of the world. So I'm going to turn off all distractions, write for an hour. And now I'm working on this book series that's like an anti-MLM crime drama series. So I'm really excited to share that with you guys because it's going to be a 10-book series and I'm working on book 1 right now. And in addition to that, I started, you know, mapping out more of some of these holiday romances and a bunch of books that are going to be set in the Cancel Sean Boston expanded universe. So there's like a lot of creative projects that this book has inspired me to work on. So a lot of it was tangibly helpful, but a lot of it was also just bullshit. It was really just those main 2 ideas of the morning journaling and the artist date and like the setting aside time with no distractions and things like that that got me in the mood to be creative. But the rest of it, I was just like, girl, what? This is all like spiritual shit. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with being spiritual. I want to make that very clear. I am respectful of everyone's religious beliefs as long as they're respectful of people's different beliefs or lack thereof. I think as long as we can all respect each other, that's great. What were your thoughts on the book as a whole?
First of all, I host a podcast about this nonsense, about spirituality and creativity, so like definitely my wheelhouse. But I was raised both Catholic and Unitarian at the same time. But then as I grew up, it was like I found that spirituality and creativity was, you know, something that spoke to me. Like as I started creating music, it was like, okay, this is me tapping into my intuition. I started going down more like Buddhist rabbit holes and stuff like that. And then I read The Original Artist Way in 2016, and I found a copy of it in my atheist mother's basement. Which she's the Unitarian one. She was more like humanistically minded and extremely creative. And so reading that book, I will say, current me would have some notes about the manifestation things. I don't remember what 2016 me thought about the manifestation things, but I did it in a book club, and I did the whole 12-week thing with some people I knew from the improv scene, and it was nice to start the practice of journaling and artist dates and tapping into my intuition with that. Part of why I was drawn to The Artist's Way is it really poked at the idea of spirituality and if spirituality and creativity are together, that means that how we describe our spiritual experience comes from the same place as poetry. And it is this complex and emotional thing. And honestly, I think that's why music can be so universal, because it, you know, cliche, but music speaks to things that, you know, words can't express. My thought process with how I view the world is I see the universe, or whatever I'm calling God today, if I feel like calling God, is as an improv partner, okay? So like when you are, so you'll have like an initiation, you'll have an intention, and then maybe you'll see life reflected back at you, or maybe, you know, you're just going about your day and then you see something. It's like getting into a headspace where you're just putting all the different pieces together, and it's like doing a puzzle. Now, I'm someone who geeks out about synchronicities, so I think Julia Cameron was the first person to be like, one of the first books that I remember recently to start to validate this idea of synchronicities. But as I look back on it, it's like I have an issue with "and therefore God exists" language. If tapping into our creativity allows us to intuitively see all these different things and help us make stories and meaning of the world, then that's our creativity.
That's part of my problem is lately I've been reading too fast. I've been reading a bunch of books to review. I've been reading a bunch of books for the show, and maybe I do need to read some stuff a little slowly and stop and say, all right, what do you mean by this? I mean, that is part of the reading process, and that can be part of something that can be really impactful if you do it right.
For sure. And I'm guilty of that with, like, I went through a phase of reading self-help books like they were romance novels.
Yeah.
You just, like, go through.
Yeah.
And I have been drawn more towards the mystics and more towards, like, the people with the PhDs in the philosophy and not, like...
I want to look into more philosophy because I don't know much about philosophy, and I think I think the problem is that a lot of self-help stuff is repackaged philosophy in a way that's just written to make it sound relatable, but doesn't really go into how or why these thoughts came to be in the first place and why people view the world this way.
And I think all Artist Way book clubs need to be equipped with at least one SAVY or one my friend who was in my book club who was more atheistly minded. I think the book club model is the best because, like, a good percentage of book club conversations are shit talking, Julia. Like,
oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, like, in all Artist Way book clubs, the 2 Artist Way related book clubs I've done, like, there has been space for... And then Julia said this, and I don't know about that, but this is how I interpret it.
The thing that felt the most scammy out of all of this, though, was when she made an Artist's Way course. Whenever the business gurus come out with the courses, I get a little skeptical, so we're gonna take a look at that real quick. Okay, y'all, so here is the course. This is the Artist's Way. The Artist's Way online course is divided into 12 weeks of videos and prompts to complement the structure of the book. So the course is just basically, like, pre-recorded video content. This is, again, one of those things, if you guys remember about a year ago, Recovering Hunbot and I did a video together reviewing business guru courses, and she has a master's degree in instructional design, and she was kind of talking about how a lot of courses aren't really courses, they're just passive content, whereas, like, the idea of a course is to have learning goals, learning objectives. Often you want to have interaction between student and professor if possible, and in a lot of these courses it's just pre-made passive content that's basically like, you really can just get it all out of the book. So this course is like, recovering a sense of safety. It's about core negative beliefs, affirmation. So again, it's a lot of that, like, believe in yourself, manifest it, say positive things, and it'll come to fruition kind of thing. Recovering a sense of identity. She talks about crazy makers, the inner critic, and things like that, which it's always a little bit of a red flag to me when someone who's trying to make money off of something sells you this idea that there's crazy makers, there's people who are the haters who don't believe in you, and they're just bad because here's why. And usually it's something that's like, this person is trying to squash your creative dreams because they're just jealous of you and they could never never have the courage to follow their own dreams. And it's like, that's a lot of projection you're doing. That's a lot of reading people's minds you're doing. That's very bold of you to think that you understand what's going on in someone else's head. And it's also the same rhetoric that MLMs use to keep people in their cults by being like, hey, cut the toxic people out of your life. I agree that it's important to have boundaries and that it's important to be able to say to people, hey, you know what? This is my dream. This is what I'm doing. And to be able to be forceful in those ways. But I'm not a fan of, like, categorizing someone as all of a hater without listening to the feedback they actually have for me. But that's just my personal experience. Again, your experience might be different and that's fine. Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot to talk about the media deprivation. Okay, so she talks about this in the book. This was another place where it felt very, like, privileged. So she's talking about how when she was teaching creative writing, when she was a professor, she had this class where she told her students that their assignment, in addition to their creative assignments for her, was that for 1 week they were not allowed to read. So this was in, like, the late 80s, early 90s. So this was before social media. It wasn't like people were scrolling on their phones. Because, like, nowadays, I could see telling people, your assignment is you must take a break from social media or something. I could see that having benefits and see, like, giving yourself that challenge. But to have a professor say and she was, like, specific about this. She's like, you're not allowed to read. You're not allowed to read the newspaper. You're not allowed to read books. You're not allowed to read I don't know if I don't remember if emails were around at the time of what she was saying, because emails became popular in what, like 1993 or so. Yeah, so no emails yet. But you weren't allowed to read like anything. The whole thing was, if it is words, if you are looking at words and interpreting them in your head, you are not allowed to do that. And then she talked about how immediately when she gave the class that assignment, and you know, the idea behind the assignment was, don't read for a week because this week it's going to be all about producing, not about taking in, not about consuming, not about letting all that input come into your head, and instead focusing solely on producing things this week, and then being able to moderate that time where you take in sensory input versus when you produce things. I get the importance of being able to draw that difference, but she made this so extreme, and her students started saying things like, okay, but I have to read for my other classes. I have other classes other than yours and other professors that are making me read for an assignment. I have a job. I have to read things at my job for my work to make money for my livelihood. And she was basically like, those were all excuses. She basically laughed it off, and the book was like, those were all excuses. You gotta be devoted enough. And she was like, if you want to badly enough, you can come up with an excuse not to read anything for an entire week. And I was like, girl, no, you can't. Do you want people to get fired? Like, just because you have a good professor job and you're stable in your professorship job right now doesn't mean other people are. Other people might be living paycheck to paycheck, and if they don't read something for their job, their boss gonna fire them. Do you understand how awful it is that you're like basically saying, well, you can choose to either fail my class or get fired from your job, so fuck you either way? Like, that's horrible. So I was really mad about that. I can see the idea of media deprivation being a good thing if you're able to take a week off of, you know, I think a lot of times, especially nowadays, when this book was written, it was true too, but even more so nowadays with the internet and with social media, we do get a lot of constant things bombarding us from every direction, and I can see the value in taking time away from that, but to make it an assignment where your grade is going to hinge on, did you do any reading at all this week? Hope not. I think that's incredibly awful. So that basically the whole thing is all about, you know, rediscovering your creative side and all of that. The course, here's the thing. If I click purchase this course, the course is $150. At least she doesn't end it in a 7. It's $150. But from this, I'm like, is this just videos? Is this just pre-recorded videos? Am I paying you $150 for you to send me 12 videos? Is that what this is? Or is there more to this? Is there like assignments? Do I get feedback from anyone? Is there any type of interactive component? Is there like an online like forum where students interact with each other and give each other feedback? Is there anything? Or is it literally just videos? And I don't know. There isn't enough information here about that. And that's what I'm like, that's kind of sus. It's a little sus, Julia. So overall, I can understand why Rachel Hollis recommended The Artist's Way, because it's full of manifestation and bringing spirituality into the creative. It is a business guru paradise. However, I can also see where some of the benefits are in it, because I did get some tangible value out of the book, so I'm not knocking it as a whole. However, I do think there were a lot of things in it that really didn't resonate with me and really rubbed me the wrong way. If you read The Artist's Way, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm also happy to see things from people who got, you know, good value out of it. Like I say on this channel a lot, very few books are all good or all bad. There are often books that you can both criticize and snark on, but also learn something from, and those are actually my favorite books, because to be able to read something critically but still figure out what you're learning shows that you're able to read something in an objective way and pick it apart and kind of have that conversation with the text, which I think is really important for overall learning and knowledge and growth. So I guess that's why, yeah, I've got the mixed feelings, because there are some beneficial pieces to this, but then there's also some things that don't resonate with me. But I'm really glad to hear that it did resonate with you, because you produce some really amazing music. So if anything that's making you get more music out there is something that I gotta say, hey, I like it, because I like your music a lot. Where can people find your music, Gail?
Yeah, so people can music on all of the streaming platforms. Bandcamp is the best if you want to buy music. Go to Bandcamp. But yeah, I'm on iTunes, Spotify, all the places. And then I also have my podcast, Faith in What Resonates, and that is more of me talking to different musicians about their spiritual journeys, and that is in the New Faith New Media podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. NewFaithNewMedia.net is the website for the podcast network. Progressive Interfaith Podcast Network, making cool stuff, and being loud about spirituality in ways that are welcoming and inclusive, because that doesn't happen.
So let me know your guys' thoughts on everything in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts on the upcoming book projects that I'm working on. By the way, signed copies of Savvy Business Owner are now available on my website, savvywritesbooks.com, as well as signed copies of my book Sculpt Yourself and some new dolls and stuff I've put up there. So if you are interested in all of that stuff, be sure to check out savvywritesbooks.com, linked in the description below. I will see you guys again next week. In the meantime, please don't forget to support small business and have a fantastic end of the week. Bye.
Get you some nuts.
There was lots of memes.
Makes me wonder if I should take up lesbianism.
Chicago.
You guys asked for it.